saw what I can only describe as some kind of demon. I'd like to tell you what I lived through, but prefer to remain anonymous. I'll try to resume facts, but a lot of things happened. Though all bizarre, all very true. Some others witnessed these events, and they were afraid at the time too. I live in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. My grandmother bought a country house in the rural areas nearby, next to a very small town called São José de Lapa. It was a very big house, lots of land. My big family used to go there almost all weekends. The cousins used to play soccer or pool there, while the rest of the people spent their time talking and cooking. It was supposed to be a peaceful environment. But in 2005, I was graduating, but I had lost my job, so I decided to live there full-time, alone during the week. This way I wouldn't have to pay rent, and I could study in peace for my civil service exams. The house was situated next to the woods, and we had a little farm, which produced milk and lettuce. We had no neighbors living nearby. At first, I constantly heard some noises at night. Nothing too strange, I thought. Probably animals or the wind. But things started to get spooky, gradually. In the beginning of 2006, my cousin and I were alone in the country house playing pool at 2 a.m. Suddenly, we heard Ave Maria by Schubert playing out of nothing. We just froze. I thought he was playing a prank on me, and he thought I was playing a prank on him. Before we could do anything, the music stopped. The next day, we told our family about the incident. Not only did they claim they didn't play any music, they didn't even believe us. When the weekend was over, my relatives left, and I was alone again. Just a few days after this creepy episode, I heard out of nowhere a baby crying, very loud. It was like there was an infant screaming inside the house. I was honestly just so freaked out. I got a ridiculously old gun, and I ran to my bedroom where I locked the door. It was about 11 p.m. Obviously, I couldn't sleep. After a long night, it was finally the next morning. I called my relatives to tell them what had happened. All of them laughed at me, except my grandmother. She told me she sensed something strange at the country house, and since she's a spiritist, she decided to call a medium to see if there was something wrong with that house. The medium was a former priest who studied exorcisms but had to leave the Catholic Church because of his sightings. He went to our house, and when he arrived, he just started to feel bad. Then he asked for a minute alone and walked through the entire house. When he returned, he had tears in his eyes. He said that this terrain was in the past part of a much larger farm, and the place where the house was built is where the senzalas were. Well, senzala is the name in Portuguese of the place where African slaves were imprisoned during slavery age in Brazil. The priest added that he saw an African woman with a child, both very skinny, standing by the wall just where I used to sleep. After a ritual, this medium priest claimed that the house was free of erratic spirits, but that was not true. Less than 1 week after this, about 12 people, amongst friends and relatives, were talking in the yard, enjoying a barbecue in the evening. Suddenly, my aunt screamed that she saw some kind of dog smiling at her from the second-floor window. We rushed inside, all of us, to look for what she saw. While we were searching for this thing room to room, I went to my bedroom to get my old pistol with my brother. When we entered this room, I saw the worst thing I ever saw in my life. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't warm. It was something evil. There was black smoke near the ceiling, and the room was freezing cold. We both saw it. We both felt it. We couldn't do anything. We were frozen, but It was more like this thing was controlling us. We couldn't scream, run, or react. We just stood there, looking at this thing against our will, feeling desolation. I can't describe the feeling fully, but we were paralyzed by this. I could feel only tears rolling down my cheeks. After a few seconds, this black smoke vanished through the window, and suddenly we could do what we needed to do. We ran for help with the sensation that we saw evil itself. It wasn't a ghost or a bad spirit. It for sure wasn't a dog. It was a demonic and evil thing. The same night, all my relatives decided in fear to leave the house immediately. The next 2 months, we didn't go there, and my grandmother decided to sell the house. When we were handling the land plot papers, there was an appointment about the first owner. He was a farmer who had slaves during the 1880s. We managed to sell the house to a retired prosecutor, and my grandmother alerted him about the events, although she mentioned ghosts, not demons. The guy laughed at this, but strangely, sadly, he took his own life 1 year after buying the house. In 2008, I bought a house whose previous owner had taken his own life. He left behind his wife and 3 small children. I didn't know that when I bought the house, but even if I knew, I must say, I would have still bought it because it was very cheap, and I was never really a superstitious person. Well, soon after we moved in, a lot of creepy things started to happen. Firstly, my children were scared for no reason, even during the day. I thought it's just because we were in a new place. One evening, my daughter told me that she saw a person in our kitchen through the door's window, which is frosted glass. But when she entered the kitchen, nobody was there. A few days later, me and my husband saw the same silhouette in the kitchen. And when we entered, nobody was inside. We clearly saw a silhouette of a man, both of us. We actually thought that it was my father-in-law, the only one who had a key to the house besides us. When we entered and there was nobody inside the kitchen, we had the same reaction. We gotta get out of here fast. We dashed out of the kitchen. After a few silent minutes, we went back, but we left the door open. We checked everywhere, every room of the house. There was nobody. There's no point to say that I couldn't sleep at all that night. I couldn't. The kids were more and more scared to the point that they refused to go to the toilet alone. I couldn't sleep. My husband couldn't sleep. I was having lots of nightmares. Sometimes I was just feeling watched. My husband got ill with no medical explanation. Shortly after, I was ill too, also inexplicable. Several times I saw a crow in my yard, on the fence, staring at me. Normally, I wouldn't think anything bad about seeing a crow. As I said, I'm not superstitious, but this one was giving me the creeps with no logical reason. A lot of things inexplicably broke in the house too. The pipes busted several times. The plumber was baffled as to how. He really couldn't understand why, and that didn't really help us. The light bulbs in the kitchen kept blowing out. An electrician came several times to see why it was happening and couldn't find an explanation or a solution to prevent it from happening again. Well, soon we left the country, not because of our creepy house. The house is actually empty now. Sometimes we go there during the summer, but we actually prefer sleeping somewhere else. There's a lot of negative vibes there. A couple times a year, we seriously consider selling it because we don't like going there at all.